Hi Purple Class, today I'm going to be reading chapter 4 of Dirty Bertie. Angela's front door was festooned with pink balloons. Mum walked up the path with Bertie hopping after her like a giant pink jumping bean and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Nicely came to the door. "Hello," she said, and then, "Oh, good heavens," as her eye fell on Bertie. "I'm an earthworm," Bertie explained. How lovely, Bertie," said Mrs. Nicely. "Do come in." Bertie showered clods of earth on the carpet as he bounced through the hall. Most of Angela's friends had come as princesses and fairies. The front room was a sea of pink tutus. "You're here, Bertie," said Angela, running up to him. "I'm a fairy, look, I've got wings." "I'm an earthworm," said Bertie. "I got you a present." An arm emerged from the sleeping bag, holding a scruffy package. Angela tore off the wrapping paper. "Thank you," she trilled, dropping the face paints on top of her big pile of presents. Bertie gazed at them longingly. "Let's play a game," said Mrs. Nicely. "Who wants to play musical statues?" "Me, me," chorused the fairies and princesses. The music played and they all danced round the room. "Bertie isn't dancing," moaned Angela. "Yes, I am," said Bertie. "This is how earthworms dance." Bertie rolled over and over on the floor so that the dancing fairies had to jump over him. The music suddenly stopped. "Statues, everybody, statues!" cried Mrs. Nicely. The fairies and princesses became wobbling statues, but Bertie, who was feeling a little hot and dizzy, hadn't been listening. He just kept rolling straight into one of the fairies. Laura wobbled and fell into Angela. Angela wobbled and fell on top of Maisie and Claire. Soon all of the statues had collapsed in a heap. Bertie rolled to a halt at Mrs. Nicely's feet. "Did I win?" he said. Tea was pink, pink biscuits, pink ice cream, and pink birthday cake in the shape of a heart. Bertie ate worm style by licking things off his plate. "Bertie, please don't slurp like that," sighed Mrs. Nicely. "Sorry," replied Bertie. "Worms can't help it. They don't know about manners." When tea was over, Mrs. Nicely surveyed the mess on the floor. Most of it had collected under Bertie's chair. "Can we go to the bouncy castle now?" asked Bertie, tugging on her sleeve. "In a minute, Bertie," she said. "Angela, why don't you all go next door and play with your presents?" While Angela's friends played with her little patty pony set, Bertie eyed the face paints. Maybe he would just try one. He wriggled an arm out of his sleeping bag and selected a black face paint. He drew on his chin and looked in the mirror. Next he drew on his cheeks. Perhaps he would turn himself into a vampire or a zombie. Or better still, he was so busy that he didn't notice the room had gone quiet. "Oh, Bertie," said Angela. "Ah," said Bertie. "I was just, borrowing them." "What have you done to your face?" "I'm a slug," said Bertie. "You said you were a worm. "I was, but now I'm a slug. A big, black, slimy slug." He slithered on the floor, making slimy, sluggy noises. Angela's friend shrieked with delight and ran to hide behind the curtains. Angela peeped out, her eyes shining. "Make me a slug too, Bertie," she pleaded. Mrs. Nicely was still tidying up when the doorbell rang. Thank goodness it was over for another year. She went to answer the door. Bertie's mum stood on the doorstep with 3 other parents. "I do hope Bertie's behaved himself," she said. "Oh, yes," said Mrs. Nicely. "He's such a lively boy." She led them in through the back door. "They're all playing in the garden," she said. "Angela's had such a lovely time. They've been good as—" Mrs. Nicely stopped in her tracks. 8 children were bouncing on the bouncy castle, but the princesses and fairies who had come to the party had vanished. In their place were ugly green monsters in filthy tutus who looked like they'd crawled from a swamp. In the middle of them all was Bertie bouncing and weeping. "Look, Mum," said Angela, "I'm a creepy caterpillar." "Bertie did it." Mrs. Nicely looked at Bertie's mum. The other parents looked at Bertie's mum. Bertie's mum looked at Bertie. "What?" said Bertie. Back in his room, Bertie was glad to be reunited with Arthur. Personally, he couldn't see why everyone had made such a fuss. What was the point of giving someone face paints if they weren't allowed to use them? Anyway, he told Arthur with a smile, I don't think they'll be inviting me next year. He considered it. Really, the party hadn't turned out so badly. He felt in his pocket and brought out something pink and sticky. Look, Arthur, he said, I saved you some cake. And that's the end of it. So if you have any book suggestions, I'll try and decide which one to read out of them. Bye.